The dust trembled beneath his hooves. Blackstorm stood still at the center of the empty arena, the late sun bleeding gold across his scarred back. Steam rose from his nostrils like smoke from an engine, and his eyes locked on the chute gate, as if waiting. Not angry, not afraid. Just ready. Somewhere, someone was about to try again, and this time, he already knew it wouldn't be like the others. The annual Copper Ridge Rodeo wasn't just a weekend event. It was the heartbeat of the town. Families lined the bleachers with coolers and folding chairs. Toddlers wore plastic cowboy hats, and the smell of grilled meat hung in the air like smoke before a storm. Behind the grandstands, the real world waited. Pens, mud, sweat, and monsters in cages. Blackstorm wasn't in the spotlight. He was kept behind an extra gate, away from the others. No handler lingered near him too long. He'd broken more ribs than anyone dared count. And rumor said a man once lost his eye just trying to get the saddle on. Frank Dillard, the man who owned the rodeo and most of the county, leaned into the microphone with his gold-ringed fingers and sharp grin. $20,000, he barked, for any cowboy who can last 8 seconds on that beast. Any takers? The crowd whooped, laughed, doubted. In the stalls, Blackstorm twitched one ear, still watching the shoot. He didn't care for the money, the men, or the myth, but something had shifted in the air. He could feel it, and he hadn't yet seen the true danger. Not the fences, not the spurs, but the girl watching from the shadows. Callie Brooks knew how to move without being noticed. 15 years old, the daughter of the woman who cleaned the rodeo toilets. She lived in a rusted trailer behind the farrier's shed, just past the hay silos. Her boots were always muddy, her jeans 2 sizes too big, and she spoke only when forced. Every morning before sunrise, she scraped manure from the stalls while Dennis, her uncle, drunk or hungover, shouted orders from a lawn chair with a beer in hand. "You want to eat? Then shovel faster," she never answered. The last photo she had of her dad was folded in a sock drawer, his cowboy hat tilted, a smile on his face. He died in this arena, crushed on the 3rd second of a ride. She never needed anyone to say it. She knew the name of the bull on the report, the gasp from the crowd, the way no one looked her in the eye after. Blackstorm. Now, 5 years later, she fed him from behind the gate, never too close. He watched her, calmly, like he remembered. The others mocked her. "You bringing him cookies, Brooks?" Gonna whisper him to sleep, but she didn't flinch. Her hands gripped the bars. Her eyes never left his. Later that afternoon, she heard the announcement again. Wade Collier's voice booming across the fairgrounds. 20 grand! For the rider with guts to break the unbreakable. Gasps, cheers, nervous laughter. Callie stood behind the livestock trailers, staring at the arena as dust clouds danced. She should have turned away, but Blackstorm turned his head. Their eyes locked, not rage, not wildness, recognition. That night, she returned to the storage room where old gear collected rust. Her hands were raw from work, her back soaked in sweat. She reached beneath a tarp and pulled out something stiff with time, her father's old leather belt. Callie traced the name burned into the leather. J. Brooks. One side was stained. She didn't ask why. She clutched it tight, not for luck, for truth. She didn't want the money. She wanted the silence to end. Just then, Dennis stormed in, reeking of beer and bitterness. "What the hell are you doing in here?" "I found Dad's belt." He ripped it from her hands. "He died like a damn fool. You'll do worse." She said nothing, but behind them, in the distant dark, Blackstorm had risen, ears forward, breath still, watching. The next morning, Callie kept her head down. She raked. She hauled feed. She scrubbed water troughs until her fingers bled, but something had shifted. Something inside her refused to stay small. That night, long after the last truck pulled out and the lights dimmed across the arena, she returned to the practice yard with a makeshift rig, a wooden barrel balanced on hay bales, rope strapped across like reins. It was a child's version of a bull, but it was hers. She swung one leg over and gripped the rope tight. Then she let her body move, once, twice. She tried to mimic the buck. Her core burned, her legs wobbled, she fell, again and again, until her shirt clung with sweat and her breath came ragged. A voice startled her from the shadows. "You trying to break your back, or just making a mess?" Callie turned. May Turner. People barely noticed May anymore. Once a champion barrel racer. Now she swept under the bleachers and fixed broken fence posts no one else bothered with. Callie didn't speak. May walked over, examined the barrel. "Where'd you learn to sit a ride?" "I didn't," Callie muttered. May nodded once. "Good. That means you're not doing it wrong yet." The next night, May returned with a worn-out saddle and gloves 2 sizes too big. "You ain't trying to win pretty," she said. "You're trying to hold on." Every evening after that, they trained in secret. Callie bruised ribs, scraped skin, cried once, but never quit. The others still mocked her. "You playing cowgirl again, Brooks? Go clean a toilet." But Callie just pulled the cap lower over her brow and kept moving. Blackstorm noticed. Every time she walked past his pen, he stood, eyes steady, no pawing, no pacing, just present. Frank Dillard heard rumors of someone sneaking around the practice yard. He sent a ranch hand to investigate. Dennis was quicker. He found her behind the bleachers, soaked in dirt and shame, the saddle beside her. "You think this makes you strong?" he slurred. "You think you're different from your old man?" "I'm not trying to be," she whispered. He slapped the saddle onto the ground. "You're a goddamn joke." She didn't flinch. Later that night, while May wrapped a bandage around her wrist, Callie asked, "Why are you helping me?" May looked toward the pen, where Blackstorm stood under the moonlight. "Because that bull only lifts his head when you walk by, and that means something I don't understand yet, but he does." Callie stared at the silhouette. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about something older, something wordless, like the way the wind knows where it's going without ever saying a thing. The heat hung thick over Copper Ridge by Friday afternoon, the kind of heat that presses into your bones and makes you feel like the world is waiting to crack. Callie didn't notice. Her hands were blistered from rope burns, her shins black and blue, but she moved like someone born to endure it. Every step was quiet, purposeful, until Frank Dillard saw her. She had just finished restocking hay bales by the far end of the arena when she heard his boots behind her, heavy, impatient. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he snapped. Callie turned slowly. Working? Don't lie to me." He jabbed a finger toward the practice yard. "You think I don't know you've been sneaking around, playing rodeo princess?" Callie's lips pressed into a tight line. Frank's voice dropped lower, more venomous. "You're the help. You clean stalls. You don't ride bulls. And if I see you anywhere near that chute again, your mother doesn't just lose her job, she loses her home." That hit harder than any fall. Callie didn't argue. She didn't beg. She nodded once and walked away. But that night, she didn't go home. She walked to the far end of the property, past the barns, into the trees. The only sound was cicadas and the slow thunder of her own breath. There, using an old tree stump as her base, she mounted the rope again and again. Every time she fell, she bit back a scream. Blood trickled from her elbow, dirt clung to her hair, a splinter lodged under her palm. Still, she got back up, over and over. The moon rose higher. At one point, her knee gave out and she fell hard. The air knocked from her chest. She lay there, staring at the stars. She thought of her father. Not the smiling photo, but the silence that followed him. The way people stopped saying his name. The way Dennis called him a fool. And for the first time, her throat clenched. Not from grief, from rage. Her hands closed into fists around the leather belt at her side. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone else anymore. This was about being seen, about refusing to vanish like he did. Across the pasture, a truck engine growled. She froze. Dennis. He'd been drinking. Again. He stumbled toward her with a flashlight, swaying as he walked. "You disobeyed me," he slurred. "You want to be like your daddy so bad? Fine. Die like he did." She didn't run. She stood there, dirty and bruised and shaking, but standing. He raised a hand, didn't swing, because something growled behind them, low, deep, like thunder beneath the earth. Blackstorm. He was pressed against the far gate, muscles tense, eyes burning like coals in the dark. Dennis froze. For a second he looked sober. "Stupid animal," he muttered. "Should have been put down years ago." But Callie stepped between them. Her voice was calm. "Go home." Dennis hesitated, then turned, grumbling curses into the night. Once he disappeared, Callie dropped to the ground. Her breath trembled. She curled the belt around her wrist, pulling it tight like armor. That night, in the quiet barn where May kept old tack and forgotten memories, Callie lit a lantern and stood in front of the mirror. Her reflection didn't look heroic or ready, but she didn't look away. From the shadows behind her, May spoke gently. "You could walk away from all this, you know." "I could," Callie said, "but I won't." Have you ever felt like the world made up its mind about you before you ever got the chance to speak? Callie Brooks didn't have the right boots, the right name, or even permission to try, but something deeper kept her going. Not pride, not anger. Instinct. If you've ever held on when everything told you to let go, tell us in the comments. Someone might need your story too. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the sky was already glowing faint pink when Callie stepped into the quiet barn, where May kept her tools, her silence, and her memories. May stood by the saddle rack, sipping black coffee from a tin mug. She didn't look surprised. "Didn't sleep, did you?" Callie shook her head. "I made my choice," she said softly. May raised a brow. "That right? I'm not waiting for permission anymore." May studied her a long moment, then walked to a drawer and pulled out a dusty pair of gloves, worn thin but still sturdy. "They're too big for you," she said, "but they'll hold." Callie pulled them on. From that morning on, everything changed. She trained like fire, every motion deliberate, every fall accepted, every bruise worn like proof. She mapped the rodeo grounds in her head, memorized the guard rotation, found gaps in the fence near the back chute. May helped, quietly, never asking why. They never talked about Frank, or Dennis, or her father, but Callie started keeping the belt on her at all times, looping it through her jeans, even while sweeping stalls, like a silent declaration. One night, under the stars, she asked May, "Do you think the bull remembers?" May didn't look up. "I think he remembers everything." By Thursday, the town was buzzing. Posters hung everywhere. Final ride, $20,000 for 8 seconds on Blackstorm. Kyle Jensen, the rising star, perfect teeth and $1,000 boots, was set to ride. The crowd already picked their hero. But Callie wasn't watching him. She was waiting for the moment between showmanship and chaos, when the spotlight blinked, when everyone else was looking the other way, because now she wasn't hoping for a chance. She was creating one. Saturday arrived heavy with dust and anticipation. The arena pulsed with noise. Boots thudding on bleachers, country music blaring through old speakers, and Wade Collier's voice rolling like thunder across the fairgrounds. "Ladies and gentlemen," he shouted, "the final ride of the night, the legend himself, Blackstorm." Back behind the arena, Callie stood in the shadows beneath the bleachers. She wasn't shaking. She was counting, every step, every second. She'd watched the rotation for days, knew when the gate guards would turn, knew where the wristbands were kept for registered riders. Earlier that morning, she'd found a discarded tag in the trash. Number 86, faded but intact. It was enough. Callie pulled on her gloves, now molded to the shape of her hands. She tied her father's belt tight around her waist, not for grip, but for grounding. The air shifted. Frank Dillard stood by the chute, smirking as Kyle Jensen adjusted his vest and flexed for a swarm of cameras. He looked like he belonged there. Callie didn't. And that was her power. She waited until Kyle stepped forward to mount, then slipped through the fencing behind the holding pen. No one saw her. All eyes were on the superstar. But in the corner stall, Blackstorm paced slowly. His muscles rippled like thunderclouds. He stopped as she approached, didn't flinch, didn't breathe heavy. He just turned and waited. From the shadows above, May watched. She clutched the railing tight, eyes never blinking. Then everything fell apart. Kyle Jensen froze at the edge of the chute. He stared down at Blackstorm, shifted uncomfortably, and stepped back. The crowd gasped. Whispers spread. Confusion churned. Wade Collier tried to recover, laughing nervously into the mic. "Well, folks, maybe the legend spooked our legend in the making," boos echoed. Frank's smile collapsed, and then someone moved toward the gate. Not a cowboy, not a man, a girl, Callie. She didn't walk fast, didn't wave or pose. She just moved like someone with nothing left to lose. A rodeo hand stepped forward to block her. "You can't." She showed the faded number 86 tag. He hesitated. Frank shouted, "What the hell is this?" But it was too late. Callie reached the gate. Blackstorm stilled. The crowd fell into a strange silence. No one knew her name. No one knew why she was there. But something told them. She wasn't bluffing. She climbed the fence and dropped softly beside the bull. May whispered to no one, "It's time." The gate clanged shut behind her. Callie stood beside Blackstorm, the entire arena holding its breath like a lung full of dust and thunder. Wade Collier's voice cracked through the mic. I don't know who she is, folks, but someone better stop." But no one moved. Not Frank, not the judges, not the handlers, because Blackstorm wasn't moving either. He stood perfectly still, ears forward, head low, watching her. Callie reached into her back pocket, pulled out the cracked leather belt, and looped it once around her wrist. Her fingers brushed his shoulder just above the scars. "You remember me," she whispered. She didn't need to shout. He already knew. She stepped into position, one foot over the gate brace, the other on his back. The chute trembled as he shifted under her weight, but didn't buck, not yet. Then came the sound. The bell. The gate exploded open. Blackstorm launched forward like a cannonball of flesh and fury. His hooves struck the dirt so hard the ground shook beneath the stands. He twisted left, then snapped right, legs kicking, spine arched, muscles flexing against the sky. The crowd screamed. Some stood, others couldn't look. Callie held on, not with brute force, but with rhythm. She moved with him, not against him. Every twist met with instinct. Every jolt absorbed through her core, like she'd been born to feel it. 3 seconds. He jerked hard left. 4. He faked high and went low. 5. Dirt kicked into the air like smoke. 6. Her grip slipped, but she caught it. Frank shouted from the rail, "Stop the ride! This is insane!" Wade didn't move. 7 seconds. 8. The buzzer sounded like a gunshot, but Blackstorm didn't stop. He kept bucking. Callie kept riding. 9, 10, and then he slowed. His back legs dropped with less power. His breathing deepened. He stopped at the center of the arena, flanks heaving, covered in dust and sweat. Callie didn't fall. She dismounted slowly, landing soft in the dirt. The crowd was frozen. No one clapped. Not yet. Then someone near the top whispered, "She did it." And the stadium erupted. People screamed, stood, stomped their boots. Children on shoulders waved their hats in the air. May, still by the railing, wiped tears from her cheeks and laughed quietly. Wade Collier dropped his mic. For once, words failed him. Frank Dillard stormed toward the gate, face flushed red. "You think this means something?" he bellowed. "She's nothing. That bull killed her father." Callie turned, steady as stone. "I know." Frank's mouth opened, but he couldn't speak. And then Blackstorm moved. He stepped between them, slow and deliberate. His body blocked her completely. His head lowered, not in threat, in warning. Frank froze. The bull didn't need to charge. His presence was enough. Callie placed one hand on his side. She didn't speak, didn't need to. Frank backed away, the crowd booing now, at him. She looked back at Blackstorm. He looked back at her. 2 survivors, neither broken, only seen. A week later, the dust had settled, but no one forgot. At the entrance of the Copper Ridge Arena, a new photo hung in a glass frame, black and white. Quiet. It showed Callie Brooks standing beside Blackstorm, one hand resting gently on his side. Neither of them looked at the camera. They didn't need to. The plaque beneath read, 8 seconds of truth. Frank Dillard hadn't returned since that night. Rumor had it he sold off part of the land and left town. No one asked where he went. Callie's mom got a better job cleaning at the new community center, offered by the town mayor, who said, "I think we owe your daughter something." May Turner. She smiled more. She walked a little taller. People started to greet her again, as if seeing her for the first time. And Callie, she didn't talk much about what happened, but every morning, before the sun fully rose, she walked the long path behind the barns, where Blackstorm now roamed alone in the larger pasture. He always met her at the gate. She never brought ropes or gloves, just her boots, her silence, and the old belt now looped loosely in her hand. He would lower his head. She would reach out, not as conqueror and conquered, but as two beings who had nothing left to prove. Some stories don't end with a trophy. Sometimes they end with a breath, a nod, a knowing. Callie Brooks didn't set out to be a champion. She didn't ride to prove she was fearless. She rode because something deep inside her said, "You belong here," even if no one says it out loud. And maybe that's what real courage looks like. Not the loud kind, not the kind that gets paraded on posters, but the kind that stands back up, quietly, when no one's clapping. If this story moved something inside you, if it reminded you of a time you weren't supposed to make it, but did anyway, tell us. Drop a comment. Share where you're watching from. We'd love to hear the name of your Blackstorm, because sometimes the smallest voice carries the loudest truth, and someone out there needs to hear yours.